Okay, I understand we're operational again now. So would you like to come back, sir? I do apologise. Do you know where you'd got to? Yes. So if you'd like, who was asking the question?
About the willow.
And it was being answered.
Had been answered, yeah.
You've had the answer.
I wasn't happy, but
So any more members' questions? Yeah. Oh, here we are, Mr. Trapp, Councillor Trapp.
Thank you. I was here for the previous committee meeting at which your plan was discussed, and I'm glad that you have taken into consideration some of the concerns that we had. Very pleased to see that. Have you had any consultation with the neighbours at number 10 during your time? Because that seems to me one of the sticking points that was around last time.
No, there hasn't been any meetings between the developer and number 10.
All right, thank you very much.
Councillor Colbert.
Thank you, Chairman. I wonder if you could just tell me a little bit more about this acoustic fence, which I've seen mentioned in various places. I wondered what material would be proposed and whether there will be screening of it.
Yeah. So it will be timber. It's 2.4 meters high, I think, from memory. And it has been the way we are showing it at the minute on the plans is that we have left a 1 meter strip on the development side, on the southern side, so there can be landscaping around there. Obviously, there's landscaping around the western side because there's enough space there. And then obviously there is enough space between that and the boundary of Oates Lane to provide quite a comprehensive landscaping scheme. There's sort of 6 to 8 meters or whatever, 8.5 to 11 meters inside the boundary for landscaping to screen the fence itself. I mean, in terms of its composition, I don't know what the specification is in terms of what makes it acoustic, but I think that's been conditioned anyway.
Okay, because I was wondering if it was timber, how long it would last. That was the main question, because I know one can get recycled plastic acoustic fencing, which I understand is supposed to last forever.
I think in the condition it talks about the ongoing management and maintenance of that fence to ensure its longevity. I think that's part of the condition.
Any more questions? No, thank you very much indeed. And we now have Councillor Lorna Dupre and Councillor Mark Inskip. Are you both speaking, or would you like to come up to the table then, please?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Well, I just make sure you do know where the buttons are and you know the procedure. So please launch at your as you wish.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that, and I hope people know who I am. But just to recap, I'm one of the 2 district councillors for Sutton. I'm also chair of the parish council, and I was actually part of the working party that created the original neighbourhood plan, and chairing the working party that's now updating the neighbourhood plan. And I spoke last time the previous application came to committee, and today I welcome some of the changes that have been made, particularly around MP5, which and the mix of low or predominantly low-story buildings. The key point for me is still policy NP7 and this, to be clear, this is of the existing Sutton neighbourhood plan, the plan that was made in 2019, and that says housing development must contribute to meeting the needs of the village Planning proposals will be supported where the development provides a mix of housing types and sizes that reflect the needs of local people. It does go on then to say particularly in the needs of 2-bedroom houses, and it also says as well as the needs of an ageing population looking to downsize into homes for the lifetime occupation. But in particular, just to re-emphasize, it says a mix of housing types that reflects the needs of local people. As part of the process of developing a new neighbourhood plan, there was a housing needs assessment in September 2021, commissioned by the Parish Council, and ACON produced that report, and they concluded that developments, the mix we saw earlier, but just to recap, 23% 1-bedroom, 47% 2-bedroom, 18% 3-bedroom, 0 4-bedroom, 12 as 5 or more bedrooms. This application has no 1-bedroom, so none of that 23% demand. 44% 2-bedroom, that's fairly close. It has 39% 3-bedroom rather than the 18%. It has 27% 4-bedroom and doesn't address that larger requirement. Now that whilst the housing needs assessment was produced as part of the neighbourhood plan, which is now with the independent examiner, it's going to be another 6 or 7 weeks before we hear the outcome of that. It is the most up-to-date document we have of the housing needs, and therefore if you go back to the original the existing neighbourhood plan, that's where you can look for evidence of what that mix should look like. And so in conclusion, both as a district councillor, it's also a view of the parish council that with the current application still breaches that NP7. Welcome the movement on NP5. I won't go into details on that. It's still not what I think we were looking for when we created the neighbourhood plan. And it is worth saying there have been no discussions. The developer hasn't approached the parish council at all to understand what their to discuss and understand what the aspirations were of the original neighbourhood plan. And I think I spoke volumes when the applicant couldn't even recall what the parish council's objections were, and that's very different to approaches we've had with other developers who've come to Sutton. So key grounds, I think that NP7 that was rejected last time by the planning committee, that hasn't been addressed. That's still, as even the planning officer said, it's still something that isn't compliant with the policy.
Can you stay there?
Yeah, I'll stay there for questions. Sorry, yes.
Members, Councillor Trapp.
Thank you. NP5 of the neighbourhood plan.
Yeah.
It says predominantly single-story dwellings.
Yes.
Do you think this is predominantly single dwelling? Can we accept that as a fact?
I personally, I would say we're still not there. And just the background of that was that when this site was originally considered, when the original neighbourhood plan was put forward, the landowner at the time was proposing a pure development of single-story properties and no 2-story properties. I acknowledge that the applicant has made significant moves towards that, although it's taken several applications to get there. But I would still say that isn't a ground to refuse the application. But I think the bigger issue is the compliance with NP7, which is the housing mix.
I was just wondering whether your NP5 was a result for this area, for this site, was because the original owner only wanted 1-bedroom, so single-story housing.
Absolutely, that's how that came about. Yes.
So it could be thought to be an improvement if there's some 2-story housing, because that was the original idea, wasn't it?
No, so the original, we're now going back about 10 years, but the original landowner was proposing single-story dwellings, because as you saw from the photographs, that Lawn Lane and almost all of Garden Close is single-story dwellings.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Hoffer.
Councillor Iskip, I get the need and
Yeah.
or the local demand for one-bedroomed houses or one-bedroomed accommodation, but that would normally come in the form of a flat or a masonette, which would have to be two-storey. In order to be able to satisfy the demand, you're going to be asking a developer to put in single-storey, one-bedroom bungalows, or are you going to ask him to say, okay, well, you can't, that would be unreasonable.
Yeah.
But in which case, then you're going to have more masonettes and more houses, or potentially a block of flats, which wouldn't be in keeping with any of the neighbourhoods. So I'm not quite sure how you expect a developer to satisfy the need for one-bedroomed properties without building two stories.
So that I think was where you would potentially look at that exception to it being exclusively single story. That I think that was the original expectation when we put the plan together, is that, as you say, if you're trying to provide single bedroom properties, it's more likely to be a two-story property.
Yeah, so you
Yeah.
can't, if you like, you can't have your cake and eat it.
Yeah.
You can't have all two bedrooms. You can't all
Absolutely.
have all ground floor and have single bedroom occupancy.
Yes, yes. So I'm not saying here it needs to be
Yeah.
100%
Yes,
single story.
thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Trapp.
So I think one can actually have single bed occupancy. First of all, through terraces, bungalows of terraces, or a cluster of 4 bungalows that butt onto each other. That is very possible.
Any more questions? Councillor Ambrose Smith.
One bedroom, two bedroom. Presumably, many of these these one bedroom bungalows might be built with the view of a person or persons downsizing. That being the case, if you get to a point where someone is very elderly or is in ill health, would you not have to have provision for a live-in carer of, albeit on a sort of a rota system, in which case you would need 2 bedrooms? Is that a valid point of view, do you think?
We have a number of single, if I look at elderly people, we have a number of one-bedroom properties already in the village. They don't, I think the luxury of a living carer is something that most elderly people don't have, yes. Yeah, so the
Living there.
details, that there's the housing needs assessment is quite a lengthy document.
Yeah.
We're just talking about the numbers, but it goes into that detail. And those one-bedroom properties actually work at both ends. It's in terms of people looking to downsize, but also young people who've grown up in the village, who if it's they have to try and get onto the ladder of 2 or 3 bedroom, they potentially they have to move out of the village.
Going back to these downsizers getting particularly elderly, if it is a couple, one may possibly end up with a condition where the couple need to sleep separately. I mean, we're going into the realms of what if, but I mean, that is quite a valid point.
But I think what you're saying is you need a range of properties, and we're not saying it's all one bedroom, but what the housing needs assessment did is look at what properties we already have in the village, looking at what the demand with the changing demographics, and that's how they came to those conclusions. So as part of that, they would have gone through all of those considerations. Yeah.
Thank you. I think that's nearly the questions for you. I just would like a bit of clarification if I can. What I'm picking up from what you're saying is that the parish council would be really disappointed that there's no 1 beds included, and the 2 beds and the 3 beds aren't exactly what you had in mind, but nevertheless you would sort of go along with those figures. Is that?
So I'm only one parish councillor, so I can't speak for the parish council, but I suspect we'd have a range of views, but broad, they wouldn't be a million miles away from what you're saying.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, well, thank you for your speech and your time. Now we're going to. Well, no, but we've gone way over the 5 minutes, 4 minutes. Councillor Dupre, I thought you were sharing the 5 minutes as is practice. But if you'd like to have, we will then have to offer 5 minutes extra to the applicant. So if you'd like to come up and have a speech, that would be fine.
Thank you, Chair, and apologies. It was never suggested to me that we had to split the 5 minutes between us. So I'm here once again to ask you to refuse this application, which, contrary to what you may have heard earlier, is actually in the southeast of Sutton, not the southwest. The principle of development has been established by the approval of an outline application, albeit one which is substantially more extensive than envisaged by the Sutton Neighbourhood Plan, which proposed 25 bungalows. 1 or 2 changes have been made since the previous reserved matters application in April last year, including an attempt to bring it a little closer to the predominance of single-storey dwellings the neighbourhood plan requires. But the other 2 grounds on which the previous application was refused by this committee, the housing mix and the effect on a neighbouring resident with protected characteristics, remain. Councillor Inskip has spoken about the first, and I will address the second. I would also like to say that the application gives cause for ongoing concern in other ways that were not given as grounds for refusal. Chief among these is the management of water on this notoriously watery site. Residents at the bottom of the site have experience of this wet environment, including the boggy conditions of the entrance to the recreation ground to the south of the site. We have had experience on other sites of being assured that drainage arrangements are adequate only to be proven right later, but when they are not. I fully expect water to be a major issue for this site if the development is permitted, which I hope it won't be, and the parish council has expressed the same concerns. But back to the neighbouring resident with protected characteristics. The risks of this application to the family in question are severe, as attested by the County Council's Adult Services team. It could make the difference between the family remaining together or being broken up, and between them remaining in their carefully constructed therapeutic environment, or the resident with protected characteristics being institutionalized and the family losing their home and their right to a family life. It really is as straightforward as that. It's therefore disappointing, to put it mildly, that the equality impact assessment did not involve the family and was something done to them rather than with them. It's also disappointing that the family were refused the opportunity of a roundtable meeting to achieve a shared understanding of the issues, and that no notes were taken by planning officers of critical meetings. The officer's report suggests that the applicant has reduced the scale of the development to accommodate the needs of the resident with protected characteristics and his family. That is quite incorrect. Changes have been made, but not in any way that reduces the impact on the family. It would be wrong to accept the assertion in the report that Abbey should be allowed to breach council planning policy because they are doing so in order to accommodate the needs of the resident with protected characteristics. They are not and never have. The move of the fence between the development and the neighbour in Oates Lane by a few metres has not addressed in any serious way the issues of overbearing and of antisocial behaviour that caused this committee to refuse the previous application 11 months ago. The family of the resident have proposed a reasonable and viable solution, but no attempt has been made by the applicant to take this into account, and this council has not seen fit to apply its public sector equality duty to help resolve it either. The area of inaccessible open space to the east will give rise to the risk of antisocial behaviour and potentially hate crime. A report by MenCap indicates that 60% of disabled people have experienced violence, hostility or aggression, and up to 9 out of 10 people with learning difficulties have been bullied, harassed or harmed because of their disability. The suggestion that this can be prevented by surveillance by neighbours simply will not fly. A reasonable proposal by the family which would solve this issue has not been adequately considered. The application should not be permitted until and unless it has. Indeed, even setting aside the Equality Duty 2010, the Council's planning policy ENV2 requires that all new development proposals will be expected to ensure that there is no significantly detrimental effect on the residential amenity of nearby occupiers. The application fails this policy test. The previous application was refused for these reasons, and the current application should be refused for the same reasons, as it has not changed in these significant respects. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. Questions for councillor Dupre? If you have any, but please do. Councillor Trapp.
Thank you very much. So in your opinion, perhaps with the with knowledge of the applicants, the change of the boundary of the acoustic fence has not actually significantly altered the problems, or has it alleviated some of the problems or not, do you think?
It hasn't resolved the underlying issues. It leaves an area of inaccessible, allegedly open space that will be easily accessed over the kind of fencing that's being proposed. It also it relies on, as the report itself suggests, surveillance by neighbours, which is just totally unfeasible. You cannot rely on people in nearby properties continually looking out and playing kind of neighbourhood watch for this particular situation. I would also say that the police have commented that they have no objections, but I think the police have also admitted that they are not experts in the kind of issues that are faced by this person with protected characteristics and their needs in their family home. And I don't think anybody has actually listened to the family that is offering. It's not saying this is a reason why this development should never happen. It is saying we have a solution which nobody's listening
This
to.
is answering questions. It doesn't give you another chance.
Further question I wanted to ask. The other proposal, I think, about having an acoustic fence all the way across. It looks to me that from what I've read and heard today, that may be a problem in that there won't be any control over what behind the fence is, except for unless that part of the land is leased to number 10 Garden Close. It is Garden. No, it isn't Garden.
Oaks Lane.
Oaks Lane or something there. I can't remember. So may that be a solution, because none of that land is going to be used for any development. It is actually for security of the George Woods. Oops, right. Okay, all right.
Councillor Trapp, I'm trying to make sure that you're asking questions. And
I am asking questions. I'm just saying.
I just remind you.
Yes, okay. So having that as a leasehold would not affect the development as such, would it? Because it isn't used at all for anything.
I'm not sure that this is germane to the planning application per se, but the wish of the family is to put forward the solution that will enable them to have greater security, greater control over what goes on, and to ensure that that the person's life or quality of life can be preserved and that the family can remain together, and that there is a real risk if the current proposal leaves them open to the kind of behaviour that might make that impossible.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Bill. Yeah. What with this acoustic fence is going in to give protection for the person at number 10, what protection is there now to stop antisocial behaviour?
The protection is that that piece of land is not used and not occupied. It gives out onto a piece of land that nobody comes into. As far as I'm aware, the only people that have come into it have been the objectors, the planning officers and so on. It gives out onto land that is currently vacant. It will give out, if this goes ahead, onto land that is very considerably occupied and very accessible.
Thank you, councillor Dupre. Now, Mr Brindley, bearing in mind that there was an extra time given to councillor Dupre, I'm prepared to give you a couple of minutes if there's something you want to say that clarifies anything.
Just a couple of points, I think. On the mix, with regards to the one beds, a previous reserve matters application had a small block of flats on here. And it was one of the reasons for refusal on one of the previous applications because it was deemed to be out of character. So I think it's a very good point made about how do we accommodate one bed properties on the site. I heard mentioned that, you know, you could do them as 1-bedroom bungalows, but that's, you know, very land hungry and will probably lead to the loss of more units on the site. I think the other point is the other end of that scale is providing 5-bed properties on the site. 5-bed properties are very large. 5-bed properties are normally within properties that are 2.5 stories high. So that's obviously not going to be happening on this site. Then to turn that 5-bed upper accommodation onto a ground floor single-story accommodation is going to create some very large land hungry plots on here that are going to look out of character. So I think that just needs to be borne in mind with regards to the mix. Just to comment on that area of open space to the north. It's down as open space as part of the indicative layout that was part of the outline. It's intrinsic to the character of the site. It gives outlook, it gives open aspects to those new properties that are going to be living on there. You know, you then have the views through from the open space to the south to the open space to the north. What we are proposing is a 1.8 metre high stock-proof fence going across there. People won't be able to climb over it, and it still then retains its open nature for the views through and that open intrinsicness for the properties that are going to be the new properties that are on the site. So that's just to give you an insight into the thinking of the developer on that northern open space.
Do we have questions now? Yeah. Okay. How do you make this inaccessible land? How do you say a stock-proof fence, but what sort of fence is it? How do you stop people actually just climbing over it?
Councillor Huffer.
This comment I'm about to ask is actually in the exempt papers, but from the police, who suggest that an option rather than stock fencing, something called well mesh 358 anti-cut.
If we're going to go into anything,
Can we not?
from the
And I
exempt-
cannot mention that.
No.
Sorry.
Okay, planning manager. We're now going to ask members if they've got questions.
Yes.
Am I right in saying for Mr. and Mrs. Wood?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So the point of moving into an exempt session is for members to clarify if they have any questions or points of elements which are contained within the exempt pages. So it's not talk about merits or anything like that. It's merely so that you are satisfied that when we move to discussion and a vote, that you have all the information that you require in front of yourselves. Thank you.
So members, it's do you want to ask questions of Mr. and Mrs. Wood? Is that's a yes? Yes. Okay, so I think we need to go into, is it the view of the committee to go into exempt session? Yeah. Okay, so we now need to clear the link needs to go off. And only you will be able to say who's. What about the So Gavin, I think you can say anything, but
I'm just going to come back on, and we're going to keep it very brief because obviously members have had a lot of information given to them backwards and forwards, and we think as officers that we have covered off most of the points anyway. There's a couple of things to add just to some of the discussions that we've just had. The first one is just to draw members' attention to condition 9, which refers to defensible planting. So it has always been officers' intentions that any of the planting in that area would be of the type mentioned by members, and we have put a condition in there to secure that. Secondly, just a few comments around surveillance, because obviously we've got the comments from our consultees with regards to the surveillance in that area. It's not active surveillance, so it's not people sitting there looking out their windows constantly over land. It's all about perception and designing out crime. And the way that the police generally look at these matters is how many properties overlook that land, how many properties are acting as a deterrent for people to access that land. It's not about necessarily it being watched, and that's why officers consider that the approach to having as many eyes on an area as possible is generally the most beneficial, and that's why the police have responded as such. And that was just it. Actually, there was only one other thing I wanted to clarify, and that was raised by Councillor Dupree earlier. The local plan allocation was 53, not the 20 something which was mentioned, and that's clarified at 7.3.1 in the officer's report. Thank you.
okay, so that's the officers. Now, any members' questions to officers? Councillor Huffer.
Councillor Hunt. Is it possible to condition the weld, I'm going to go on about this blooming fence, the weld mesh 365 as opposed to stock fencing?
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you.
Any more questions to officers? Before we, okay. Councillor Goodall.
Do you think a lot of this debating or anger coming from people could have been avoided by meeting them and discussing this before it came to planning?
I think before an application came in, where conversations could have been had, we've got to be careful as planning officers that we are determining the planning application that we've got in front of us. So any meeting that we had would only be on the basis of what we've got. So what, in essence, what has happened here is, as officers, is we've gone out in a normal fashion to the different consultees. We've ensured that an EQIA was received. We went out to get that. We ensured that we had all the information, obviously, which was passed to us from interested parties. And then it's for us then to weigh that in the balance. During an application, it's really unusual for us to be sitting down with interested parties to go through negotiations. What we would normally do, obviously, is assess it against our policies. If we have concerns as officers, we would then seek to make negotiations as appropriate. So whilst I understand the frustration of the neighbours to the way that a planning application has been dealt with, it's unfortunately just the way that the planning system is set up. As officers, we are effectively reviewing the application as we have received it. Thank you.
Yes.
If all parties were involved, i.e. the applicant and the Woods and yourself were there, there wouldn't be a problem. There's nothing being hidden. That's all I'm saying. And the clarification they require, you know, they're very, very loving parents, and I'm worried about their son.
It's my understanding that during the lifetime of the application, the officer did ask the applicants if they were willing to undertake such a meeting, and at the time the agent declined. So that's really as far as we could push it.
Councillor Wally. Please go ahead. You've jumped ahead of Councillor Trapp.
Sorry, I mean, I agree with him, to be honest. At the end of the day, we're all human beings, and I think we could have actually pushed the applicant to actually speak with the parents, to be honest. I think most of the things that are happening today could have been avoided if that was just done before today. Thank you.
I know the comments that the member makes, but as a planning authority, we have limited ability to push an applicant in any direction. We can obviously ask a question, which was done, and then we have to then determine the application on its merits. Thank you.
Councillor Trapp.
Unfortunately, Councillor Goodall has taken out the words from my mouth. I was going to ask that very same question, so I am aggrieved. about consultation, which I think is important. And I think I agree with Councillor Akinwadi as well, that it's important. So sorry about that, and I'll keep it short.
Now we go into debate. Councillor Colbert.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask the officers, please, and you're absolutely convinced that there isn't going to be a problem with the site becoming waterlogged? Sorry, I'm sure it's in here somewhere.
Yep, so obviously that didn't form a refusal reason last time. We've got no technical advice from any of the statutory consultees that this would be a problem, and a suitable drainage strategy can't be agreed. There's an in-principle drainage strategy that was advanced, and there's a condition in the outline that requires a finalised drainage strategy to be agreed up. So the LFA, as a statutory consultee, are happy with the proposal put forward at this time, indicating that it won't lead to a flood risk. Yeah.
Members, we are now moving into debate. And so you've still got something you want to say or contribute to the debate, please go ahead. Oh, nice to hear from you.
And it's a rare chance, isn't it? Well, what can I contribute to the debate? I'm not unhappy with the actual layout of the site, even though perhaps it doesn't really conform to the neighborhood plan. It's near enough, I suppose, to it. But what I am mostly concerned about is that we have not taken into consideration the needs of the neighbor. And I think on that basis, I'd like to propose that we reject this proposal, because I do not feel that sufficient attention has been paid to what is required, and that it could be done without actually altering the plan, the proposed thing very well. But I think a consultation and assessing the needs that are essential have got to be made. And that's why I would propose that we actually reject this proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Trapp. I've made a note of that.
Thank you.
And obviously, while you're doing it, you need to think about the reasons why you would be rejecting it. Councillor Akinwale.
Thank you, Chair. I think if they could consider what the neighbors actually want, and as a condition to the actual application, that I could potentially approve it. But without that, I'll have to reject it as well. Thank you.
1 second, I'm going to ask the planning manager.
In simple terms, I'm not entirely sure how that would meet any of the tests set out in the circular for a planning condition, I'm afraid.
So
I would respectfully say no, we can't do that as a condition.
okay, so you can say that you're going to vote against it, but you'll have to have good planning reasons for going against it. And so am I making a comment here? I'm making comments of what people are saying.
Because we're not addressing the protected characteristics. What happened?
So can I ask a question to the member? Because obviously previously when it was refused, and we always have to have due regard to the previous reasons for refusal and be careful not to introduce new ones unless there's material change between the two. So previously, can I borrow that? So the previous reason for refusal, which I suspect is the area of your concern, stated the location of a 2.4 metre high acoustic fence adjacent to boundary results in poor outlook and therefore fails to preserve and protect the residential amenities of the adjoining occupier who has protected characteristics, and as such the scheme would not comply with policy ENV2 of the East Cambridgeshire Local Plan 2015 and section 149 of the Equality Act 2010. Does that cover what your
Yes.
concerns are? Thank you, just for clarity.
Okay, so we've got Councillor Gooder.
Thank you, Chair. During the question time, the applicant said they were willing to change the fence and everything else to suit. If that is if they're willing to do that, I can't see the problem of making a condition of it, surely.
I'm
In,
asking for expert.
in simple terms, we could, I'm assuming, sorry, councillor, are we talking about the element? So for example, introducing the police well mesh or something like that? Yes, we can absolutely put condition to require details to be submitted. There is a condition already, condition 9, and we can tweak the wording of that. Oh, sorry, condition 8, apologies, where we can tweak the wording of that to leave it sufficiently open for us to then consider.
So we
the
can make
material.
adjustments that would allow it to be acceptable to the applicant and the objector.
Well, what we would be doing is we would be effectively looking at whether or not the materials, so for example, what's proposed to be a stop-proof fence, whether or not the change in materials is acceptable. So we would obviously have to look at character and appearance, but obviously as well, is it doing what we want it to do? And if the applicant is happy, I'm more than happy for us to put condition on to require those details to be submitted.
Well, we're moving. Councillor Huffer.
Chair, I'm happy to propose that we accept the officer's recommendation with the amendment to the fence, the weld mesh 365 or similar to prevent climbing or intrusion. I think the officer has bent over backwards to try and get a resolution to this. I think that putting up a 2.4 metre fence along the top there would actually, as the applicant said, spoil the open view towards the church. And I understand the perception that people are going to gather and potentially over here. But I have heard all sorts of things from my back garden. I've heard loud music, I've heard children, I've heard arguments, I've had all sorts of dogs barking. I don't think that the young man concerned is necessarily going to feel any more overlooked or unwanted than he is currently. He's clearly, anybody living in number 12 can overhear and potentially see into the garden. And if you're going to harass somebody because they have special needs, currently that site is absolutely open to anybody, any probably nasty antisocial person that wanted to go around there and be horrible, could potentially do it much more easily now than they could if there was a 2.4 metre fence and other properties that would prevent them and deter them from doing it.
So you are in favour
Of approval.
approval, subject to the fence changes
Yes.
that have been made.
And the correct frosty planting, antisocial planting.
The actual wording, if we get to that stage, the actual wording will be crafted by the
Thank God.
head of planning to make sure it's acceptable.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Goodall.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to second that proposal from councillor Huffer and approval.
I've got councillor Trapp.
It's not often that I disagree with councillor Huffer, but I really think that what she just said about the noises, about odd things going on, I think is the one thing that will be upsetting to the neighbour. You just clearly just said exactly what could happen and what is going to be affecting the quality of life. So I just cannot believe it.
With all due respect, councillor Trapp, I'm not quite sure what difference a 2.4 metre fence makes and something that's anti-climb. The noise would still transmit over the 2.4 metre fence. So having the 2.4 metre fence or the acoustic fence is still going to travel over.
I think the difference is that there will be no gathering there, whereas there could be gatherings, even whatever. That's the point. And there is control that the residents, the neighbours will have over what is happening to the other side of that fence. That is the point. And I think we are.
Sorry, respectfully, both members, can I just remind you that obviously an acoustic fence is something which has been considered by acoustic consultants, and we have obviously had technical people looking into that. So when we are talking about this, please can we keep it to those elements which aren't technical? So as we've been referred to, overbearing and overlooking, because those are the elements which formulated your previous reason for refusal. Thank you.
So at the moment, we have no one on the list to speak, but more debate, people. Anybody more debate? I've got a proposal from Councillor Trapp to reject the application. I think I've got a seconder there. And I've got from Councillor Huffer, I've got a suggestion to approve it, but with changes to the wording to be agreed by the head of planning about the fence. And that is seconded by Councillor Goodall. Now, because Councillor Trapp had the first proposal in, I'm going to ask members to go to a vote as about, there was a Councillor Wilson.
Can I ask a question of the officers? Would not condition 12 enable them to make sure that the neighbour was well consulted with the sort of information that we're talking about, fences, the planning, what's put in that area of ground? I think condition 12 actually covers the point that we were talking about, if it interpreted liberally.
Would you like me to just respond to that?
Please do
Yeah, so,
one of the two of you.
Condition 12 is relating to hedgerow and tree management scheme. We've got condition 9, which obviously is relating to defensible planting, so we've already got that. And as I referred to earlier, we have condition 8, where we are requiring the details of the acoustic fence, and also then condition and stock-proof fence. So we will amend the wording effectively of condition 8 is what we were proposing. Just again, just a reminder to members that when discharging conditions, it's not custom and practice for councils to consult on those, apart from obviously on technical matters. And there's no legal requirement for us to do so. Very clearly, in this instance, I think we probably will go out for comment on it, because obviously due to the sensitive nature of the site.
Okay, so first of all, we're going to go to a vote. And the vote will be, are you in favour of rejecting the application as suggested by Councillor Trapp and seconded by Councillor Akinwale? I'm so sorry. Now, are those in, we will be having a vote, another vote, maybe in a few minutes' time on the alternative. So will those in favour of rejecting the application please raise their hands? Okay. So that's quite clear. I think but we ought to just say vote against. Yes, well, we're moving to that. So the second vote is, and the proposal, which only 2 people, I believe, have voted in favour of, will you now? And that's exactly why I'm trying to get the wording correct, so that in case there are 7 abstentions. So members, are you those against councillor Trapp's proposal? Please raise their hand. Will those abstaining please raise their hands? So that is,
Yep, so that motion is lost with 2 votes for, 5 votes against and 3 abstentions.
so now we go to a proposal of councillor Huffer that is seconded by councillor Goodall, that we accept the officer's recommendation, but with to be agreed wording about the fence, as has been discussed many times, and I believe the head of planning will read out what that reason is, or what that extra is.
I was going to suggest, can you delegate that to myself for the wording of that condition? Taking into full account, obviously, of members' reasons and interests in that. So we'll make sure that it's appropriately worded to require details of that. And then obviously any detailed submission would obviously be considered in line with members' minuted comments.
So are we clear?
Is there any debate? Or do you think there's debate?
We've had a debate and I asked people if they've got anything more to say. We've had one vote. We're now having another vote with Councillor Huffer's proposal, seconded by Councillor Goodall. All those in favour of accepting the application with the amendments the planning manager put in, please raise their hands. Got that? All those against, please raise their hands. All those abstaining, please raise their hands.
The recommendation has been approved with 5 votes for, 2 votes against and 3 abstentions.
Okay, so that is approved, subject to the discussions and agreements we've had with the planning manager. That's the end of that particular item. And we still have planning performance report from the planning manager.
Thank you, Chair. I don't propose to go into any great detail unless members have got any specific questions. The reports you have in front of you for both December and January are there for members to note and to note the performance. And that's all really I've got to say.
I've got nothing to query with you. Pardon? Councillor Trapp.
Yeah, the planning performance looks very rosy. The planning performance looks very rosy on the figures before us, but we've done a survey of applications received between the 1st of June and the 31st of December, and in that time, 15 cases are still pending decision. And there's 97 cases pending consideration, including discharge of conditions. So maybe the number of cases, and we have had a decision on overturned on appeal of the Bottisham residential home, because there was not enough, we did not determine it in time. And that's what the inspector said, that because it wasn't determined in time. So I think the cases which are pending decision are just as important to know, as well as the 100% that have been included here. And I think what perhaps we ought to do is have a metric of saying how many outstanding decisions are still being I know you're an interim planning manager, but David, but it is of concern because it actually says just how much is still to be done. Thank you.
Just to answer that question, if you have a look at the bottom of your reports, you have open take cases by team, and that tells you exactly how many cases we have on the books currently, planning applications. Just to remind members that when we talk about in time and the 13-week, and what you've got to remember is there is a process as well of extensions of time, which is something that the council does use because we are aiming to and seeking to work with applicants. The reason we have such a high percentage of those in time is because generally speaking, our applicants are happy to work with us and to agree those extensions of time. I'd be more worried if they were saying no, which they do absolutely have the legal right to do so. Just for a bit of an advance heads up, as part of obviously the ongoing review which is going on within planning, we are looking at how we culturally deal with planning applications, and I will hopefully bring something to the members' consideration at something further point in the future, but it is something that we are considering because obviously we also are very aware of the government's thoughts on extensions of time and how that may be changing going forward. But it's a bit early at the moment to be making it.
Thank you very much. Before we close the meeting, I'd just like to say a big thank you to everybody, and that's members and officers and guests for having a determination to see this matter through. We were obliged to give due weight to special circumstances. I believe the length of the meeting is indicative of what we had. And I think today's actions have actually proved the value of a planning committee where you get 10 or 11 pairs of eyes looking at something, and I think benefits come from it. So thank you very much indeed, all of you. I appreciate your support. Thank you. The meeting is closed.